Welcome to this explainer. So I want you to picture this. You're boarding a passenger plane for what is supposed to be a completely routine, totally mundane, one-hour flight. You settle into your seat, entirely unaware that you are about to become a literal part of America's greatest unsolved mystery. Today, we're going to explore a story that kicks off on a quiet pre-Thanksgiving journey and ends with a man stepping out of a commercial airliner into the freezing night sky, just disappearing into thin air. It's an absolutely unprecedented event that permanently changed airport security protocols forever.
Okay, so it happens about halfway through the journey. There's this quiet, polite man in a business suit. He calls over flight attendant Florence Schaffner and hands her a folded note. Now, thinking absolutely nothing of it, assuming it's just his phone number, she simply slips it into her pocket. But then, the man leans in closer to her and whispers, "You'd better read it." And on that note were these 6 terrifying words: "I have a bomb in my briefcase." Take just a second to let the reality of that sink in, because within hours, this single, quiet moment would set off a chain of events the world had literally never seen before.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the perfect passenger.
To really understand this mystery, we have to look at the man who bought a one-way ticket under the name Dan Cooper on November 24, 1971. The whole situation escalated so rapidly, yet incredibly calmly. At 0 minutes, he's boarding at Portland International Airport wearing a dark suit, a black tie, polished shoes, and sunglasses. Just 30 minutes in, cruising through the air, he makes his move with that note. And then, just a few hours later, he is successfully touching down in Seattle to collect a massive ransom. You know, he didn't look like a hijacker. He looked like an ordinary, calm businessman traveling with nothing but a briefcase.
But here is the most absolutely crucial point. He was calm, polite, and honestly, totally forgettable. And that is exactly what made him so incredibly dangerous. After he handed over the note, he opened his briefcase just enough for the flight attendant to glimpse what looked like red cylinders connected by wires. Now, whether that bomb was real or not, nobody knew. And frankly, nobody on that plane wanted to find out.
Moving right along to Section 2, the ransom and escape.
So, the plane is circling over Seattle, right? This is to buy authorities some time on the ground, and the tension is just skyrocketing. The FBI had never, ever dealt with anything quite like this before. His demands were meticulously planned, but surprisingly simple: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting on the runway in Seattle. He made it crystal clear, if they cooperated with these precise demands, no one on the flight would be harmed.
Let's talk about the sheer scale of that ransom for a second. $200,000 back in 1971? That was a massive fortune. As the plane circled above, the FBI was basically in a dead sprint on the ground. They're frantically rushing to gather the cash, and crucially, they are photographing every single bill to carefully record the serial numbers before delivering the money.
The sequence of events on the tarmac plays out like an incredibly tense hostage exchange. Step 1, the plane lands and the passengers are quietly released. Step 2, the money and the parachutes are handed over. Cooper meticulously checks everything, making sure every single demand is met. And then, Step 3, he forces the pilots to take the plane, which is now holding only the crew, back up into a stormy, violent night sky. And nobody had any clue what his endgame was.
So now the plane is flying at around 10,000 feet. Outside, it's wild. The wind is fierce, the rain is literally lashing against the aircraft. Cooper instructs the pilots to maintain a very slow speed. And then, at exactly 8:13 p.m., the crew notices a sudden, dramatic change in air pressure. The plane actually jerks upward. Somewhere over the dark forests of Washington state, Cooper did something no passenger had ever done. He opened the aircraft's rear staircase mid-flight and, carrying all that money strapped to his body, he jumped out into the absolute darkness.
Which brings us to Section 3, the decades-long manhunt.
The exact moment D.B. Cooper stepped off that rear staircase, the falling action of our story kicks in, launching one of the most frustrating investigations in American history. I mean, the FBI mounted an overwhelming response. This was one of the largest hunts they had ever organized. We're talking thousands of soldiers deployed, helicopters scanning from above, ground search teams combing through the wilderness, and even military aircraft scouring the forests, rivers, and mountains below. They looked everywhere.
And what do they find with all of those incredible resources? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No body, no parachute, no briefcase, not a scrap of clothing, not even a single solitary footprint. It was quite literally as if the stormy night sky had just swallowed him whole.
So for almost a decade, there was total silence on the case. Then, boom, 1980 hits, and we get a miracle discovery. A young boy is digging in the sand along the Columbia River and uncovers something really unusual. Bundles of decaying $20 bills. It totaled almost $6,000. And when authorities checked it out, the serial numbers were an exact match to the ransom money.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 4, an enduring mystery.
Now, you would think finding that money would break the case wide open, right? Actually, scratch that. This single clue raised way more questions than it answered, and it kept the mystery alive for decades. Experts have basically debated two major theories for over 50 years now. On one side, many firmly believe he died in the jump. I mean, he leaped into freezing rain at night over a rugged, brutal wilderness using parachutes he hadn't even tested. But on the flip side, others strongly argue he survived and escaped. They point to his obvious aviation expertise, his incredibly meticulous planning, and they suggest he just assumed a completely new identity and quietly lived out the rest of his days.
Despite investigating literally hundreds of suspects over the years, not a single one was ever proven to be D.B. Cooper. And finally, in 2016, after 45 years of chasing ghosts, the FBI officially closed the case. And they didn't close it because they solved it. They closed the only unsolved skyjacking in American history simply because they had completely run out of leads.
So I want to leave you with this one provocative question. Did he survive? Did D.B. Cooper die the exact second he stepped off that staircase, or did he somehow pull off the impossible and disappear forever? It is entirely possible that the final answer, a forgotten diary, an old photograph, or maybe the rest of that $200,000, is still out there right now, hidden deep within the forests of Washington state, just waiting to be found.